Something that I've noticed and I've never heard other people really talk about is that if you're neuroatypical, your ideals can be socially unacceptable. Not so much just that you're accidentally not doing the obviously ideal thing, but that you really disagree about what the ideal thing is. And I've got a lot of examples. I will try to be quick on each of them. So, openness and honesty is a big one. I've always thought that it was an ideal to be open and honest, and I've aspired to be more open and more honest. And in some ways, like in my marriage, for example, that's definitely been a positive thing. But this is just a general state of being for me, and that is very socially unacceptable the moment you get out of close relationships. And the honesty part can also be a disadvantage because you tend to trust people. You tend to assume that other people are also honest, and you get into classic situations like buying a used car, where you just assume that people will be as honest with you as you would with them, and you find out the hard way that they were not. A related thing is earnestness and intention when trying to bond with other people. You find yourself just deterring people trying to get close to people because your intention is just so blatant, and you're just already acting like your friends, starting as you intend to continue. And people do not like that generally. So if you can find people who are similar, which is what happened with me and my wife, I was convinced very early on that she was a good partner for me because of just how earnest she was. Her intention was very explicit, and that was refreshing for me. An example of where it's very easy for someone with these inclinations to accidentally cross a social line is I was at a boxing class and I was talking to this bloke and we seemed to get on okay, and we're quite friendly chatting to each other, and I mentioned something that was very relevant, like we were doing a drill and he was punching my face and I was meant to evade. And I was so distracted by, something upsetting going on in my life that I was forgetting to evade punches in a boxing class. And so I sort of explained to him, wow, I'm almost getting hit in the face because I'm so distracted by my cheating ex-girlfriend. Oh my goodness. The change in his face, from that moment on, he looked at me like I was some kind of weirdo and avoided me like the plague. His whole manner changed. I'd obviously crossed some line, made him very uncomfortable, but to me it was not a big deal to share that. And I think that this YouTube channel, some people are just going to be like, yeah, I don't want to hear this guy just telling me everything that he thinks and feels. But yeah, it's my channel, so bugger off. Another example would be there are certain contexts where it's just assumed that everyone is fake. But you don't. And an example would be if you're one of those people and you're in a work context and you're assuming that all the friendliness around you is genuine friendliness. But actually it's just a put-on kind of friendliness that happens in an office. These people don't actually care if you live or die. They're not your friends, and they're not necessarily open to being your friends. They're just being friendly because that's what you do in an office environment. And I know that I'm not alone in this, and that this is a subset of neurotypical people have this same problem, but it's definitely telling. Another part of that is hypocrisy. It's like nails on a chalkboard. People think that it's a good thing to say what they think you want to hear, or what they think will make them look good, rather than the truth. And if you're like me, you'd rather say, this is a area where I'm not strong, or this is an area that I'm not good at. I'll happily tell people the things I'm not good at, and they don't like that either. And if you tell people that you're unhappy, oh my goodness, do people not like that? Oh, don't be needy, Needy? I didn't say I needed anything from you. I'm just telling you the truth of my situation. You asked. Oh. Moralism. For me, in particular, I don't know if this is for everyone, I have this aspect of my personality where I care unusually much about morality, conceptually. And that's not to say that I'm more moral than everyone else, but it's just that I tend to think about it and worry about it a lot. And that can lead me to just being judgmental. And this might be one of those cases where an accusation of arrogance is actually warranted. I can be a bit arrogant and put myself in the position of a judge where the person just wasn't interested in having my judgment. But it does lead to interesting internal conflicts when you're trying to get on with other people. So if I look at the people who I'm currently getting on well with as friends, there are definite times when they tell me stories about what they've done in the past and what they think is okay to do. And I just disagree. I just think it's unethical. Right? But I know that there's not going to be a friendship if I constantly moralize to them. And I don't know if this has damaged relationships in the past, but I wouldn't be surprised. So the reason I bring this up, it might seem obvious that judging people makes them not like you, but if you think about what the philosophical ideals are, isn't trying to be more moral and caring about morality basically the top of the list? But it's socially unacceptable. Intellectualism is a similar one in a slightly different domain. I can't read my notes, sorry. Yes. Having principles that I've thought through over social mores. And the mores can be almost arbitrary, and that is really grating to me. It's like I've gone to a lot of effort to be a principled person and have a coherent worldview, right down to difficult philosophical basis. And other people just want to be able to come up with whatever sounds good. And that's good enough. It doesn't matter if it contradicts something else, because you don't think about it, it doesn't hurt. But I think about it, and it does hurt. tying into that, critical thinking versus normative ideas. If you think critically, you will find that a lot of normal ideas don't make sense. But they are norms and you're not allowed to dispute them. It's socially unacceptable. Again, from a philosophical point of view, this is an ideal of many philosophers throughout history, but it is not socially acceptable. There's a related issue of objectivity. And part of that is that you argue a point rather than fighting with a person. But what I've found over many years is that if you go in assuming that you're just arguing a point, you will end up fighting the person because they will take it as you attacking them, not just arguing with the point that they've said. And if I ever make my series on memetics, I'll talk about that a lot more. So, substance over presentation is a big one. And a lot of people don't care if something is good as long as it looks good. And this spreads out over a lot of domains, everything from computer user interface design to choice of mates to people caring so much more about being agreeable than being conscientious. And that can be very socially unacceptable if you fall on the wrong side of this. Individuality versus the convention. I would gain a lot of benefit from joining groups in a practical sense, in a social sense. But I find that groups tend to want to take away your individuality, and it is a very important ideal of mine that you be an individual and that you respect others' individuality. And it just seems that any group with a strong sense of solidarity that just accepts new people to wandering off the street and try and join, they all have a strong sense of surrendering individuality in order to be part of the group. And that plays into egalitarianism as well. I think it's an ideal to just consider people as being equals and judge them on their individual merits. And if they say something, you judge what they have to say based on what they've said rather than who they are or what their social status is. And I can tell you that that is completely socially unacceptable in many contexts. Like, you try telling a politician or, I don't know, a high-ranking public servant or someone higher than you in a corporation, try and talk to them like they're equal to you. And you will immediately be considered arrogant. And it doesn't matter that your idea might be better than what they're currently doing. It's just you didn't respect their social hierarchy. So this ideal of egalitarianism is just in practice socially unacceptable. And I personally just get exhausted and stressed out by this whole obsession with social hierarchy. It just seems like constant comparison to other people. Everything is a threat to your status. Everything someone says, it's not just a thing that they've said from them to you as individual human beings, it's a challenge to social status. And there's all these games about jockeying for social position that I just don't understand and don't care to. Honestly, it's against my ideals to worry too much about these things, but it's just how social interactions seem to work. And I should have written clearer notes. Oh yes, taking sides and having big rows between two warring armies of irrational people who could have got on if they hadn't just taken sides and had actually thought about what each side was saying. It seems to happen on everything from the scale of social groups above 2 or 3 people in size and all the way up to nations. Just, picking a side and having wars about something. I don't get it. Now, a lot of these things can be very isolating for the person who's got the ideals that are different to the norms, and you can feel almost ashamed, or probably actually ashamed, when someone reacts badly. I remember once at a party, someone who I got on with okay, there was a lapse in a conversation, and I was just thinking about something. And I asked a question that was, I guess, not the usual party fare. It was just something that had popped into my head that I found curious about, and I thought she might have a perspective on it. And so I asked this question, and it wasn't death, politics, whatever, known taboo topics. It was just some random thing, and the chill in the air, it was like I'd got up and taken a shit on the table for asking this, quote, out of left field, unquote, question. And that kind of thing affects you. You find that you just don't trust other people not to react well, and that really feeds into social anxiety quite badly. So when you're trying to mitigate these things, what are your options? Well, you can try and be like everyone else. And if you're neuroatypical, they call that masking, because it doesn't actually work. You don't have that ability to just fit in. So you have to pretend. And if you pretend, it's bad for your self-worth and confidence, because you're basically saying, I'm not good enough to get on with other people. And it doesn't work if you don't have that constant feed of social cues and that understanding of pragmatics. Like, you can exhaust yourself pretending and still get nowhere. And I know that from long experience. And so your other option is basically to take the approach of the self-weeding garden, which is what the authors of the Freakonomics book series call it, when you create a situation where things that are undesirable to you will reveal themselves and hopefully remove themselves from your life without you having to painstakingly pick through and get rid of them. The problem is, a self-weeding garden, when you're neuroatypical, can be a very barren garden indeed. There might just be a couple of plants in it when you want all of your garden beds to be filled. So there's an ideal of being true to yourself that's just at odds with getting on with other people. And if I can end this with a question, like if you're watching this far and you actually have an opinion on how to deal with this, how do you cast a wide enough net or somehow increase your odds without sacrificing ideals that are socially unacceptable?